Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission by Cheryl of her horse Robbie. Robbie is a 17-year-old thoroughbred that Cheryl has had for about 6 years. He was a school horse, evidently, and had become very heavy in the mouth. And she has had some lameness issues with the horse. And he's currently, she said she's wearing boots on the front legs and barefoot behind. Because it's quite rocky when she's on her way there, and that's exactly right. It's okay to keep horses barefoot, if they can stand it. Some of them can, some of them can't. But of course, even if we do, we must keep them on very soft footing in the process, and especially if the horse has had soundness issues in the past. But getting started here, what I see, I like. This is a good walk, and she has the rein over the top of the head because this horse can get a little pulley with her, and that's exactly what you want to do if they're pulling you outside the circle, is to do just that, put the rein over the top of the head, as long as the mouth isn't really opening. That's the big thing to take off here. When you're starting young horses, I always start them in just a cavesson. But with older horses, sometimes I do just this and put the line over the top of the head or hook to the inside ring once I can get the horse to stretch into the contact. But if you're really having difficulty, controlling the horse, that's what you want to do. But if you find that the horse is constantly opening his mouth and the horse is not quiet in the mouth when you're doing this, then you need to back up and go back to a cavesson and give the horse time to get its mouth in order, that is, to accept the contact with the bit, that a bit is just going to be in its mouth, because the horse won't take its, if it's constantly opening its mouth, it's basically showing it has not accepted the idea of having something metal in its mouth, and it's good to just back up and lunge off of a cavesson until you can get that going. But this seems to be going very, very well. I like the walk here. This is a good rhythmic walk for this horse, and considering this horse is just starting back into this kind of work, or starting it for the first time at 17 years old. Of course, the good news is it doesn't matter how old the horse is. If the horse is still sound enough to work, they will improve, and they will go through the changes that a 3 or 4-year-old goes through. I've done this with horses as old as 27, had no problems. But we can see basically walking by when the horse comes by in silhouette. Once again, that's all we really need to see. It tells you the whole story of how the horse has been trained. As you can see how the hip is dropped away from the spine there. You can see that bump on top of the hip. People used to proudly call that a hunter's bump, and what that really is just a bad riding bump. It means that the horse has never been worked over its back, and it's gone in very short strides its whole life, or short strides relative to how it could move. Remember, no horse that's working over its back is going to work in its full stride. It's basically impossible for it to do that, and we'll always have that lag time between the front and back end. And we'll never really get our horses really rhythmic the way we'd like them to be. That is, in relaxation. We see horses, it became popular in dressage in the last 20 years. It became okay to be in any kind of frame as long as the horse was rhythmic, but that has led to a really downfall and lowering of our sort of ideals in dressage, so to speak. So once again, rhythm and tension really has no value, because the tension will destroy your horse's legs. So once again, getting the horse to relax is really the cornerstone of correct dressage and sort of the object of it. But once again, this is a really good walk. You're doing a good job here of just staying at the apex of the triangle there. You're keeping him bending on the circle pretty well, and that's good. It looks like he's looking in the right direction. He's not going with his shoulders way outside the circle. And I like how you're walking with him and keeping this walk nice and active as you go. So this is all good. And of course, with a horse like this that you're rehabbing, remember that, rehabbing is just retraining, another word for retraining. People ask me all the time about these difficult horses they have and what to do. And basically, you have to just go back to the beginning and train them all over again, because every horse that becomes agitated and all the different things in hollow, they're all just part and parcel of the same thing. Somewhere along the way, the horse just has a faulty foundation, just like building a house. If you build a house with a bad foundation, all the walls are going to crack and everything else. So that's basically what happens to horses. Everything just starts falling apart and they go lame at a very young age, or at least way before they would have had they been trained correctly. Remember, once again, that getting the horse working over its back is what puts the shock absorber system on the back on the horse, so that it takes up the concussion of movement into the soft tissue rather than in the hard tissue of the joints, and especially some of these little tiny joints in the horse's legs, like the sesamoids and things like that, and navicular bones that are tiny, tiny little bones that have to carry and hold the weight of the horse. So once again, thus it's so important. But once again, this is a really good walk, and my point is that you can walk a lot. Like when we get into the trot work with this horse, he still looks a little bit not perfectly regular, so to speak. And but he does look regular in the walk. So once again, then we can work him in the walk and do a lot of work in the walk, and that will help him to strengthen his feet, and it will develop his top line. As long as the horse is working over his back the way you see here, even in the walk, the horse will develop. And sometimes I've worked many horses that had to be rehabbed from very bad injuries, and they could only be walked for months on end. And you'd be amazed at how much top line you can put on a horse only walking them if you do it correctly. Now, once again, a few things to think about. People say to me, oh, I want to build up my horse's hindquarters. Well, that's wrong thinking. You want to build up the horse's whole top line. And things like going out and walking up and down hills and all these kinds of things all help a horse. But if they're not working over their back, they do not help. So going up and down hills, yes, will help you develop strength across the horse's top line if it's working over its back going up and down a hill. Same thing with cavaletti on the ground, going over jumps, all of these things. If the horse isn't working over its back, it's going to do harm rather than good. So that has to be our criteria. We let the back guide all of our training. So if we can't get the horse over its back while we're doing something, whatever that is we're doing, this doesn't have a whole lot of value. So once again, we see as this horse goes into the trot here, it needs to be a lot more active. So it looks a little bit irregular there. Not real bad, but we certainly want to ask for a little more swinging trot if we can get it than what you're getting here, and getting to move a little more actively forward. But we must be careful, if a horse has had soundness problems or at all seems to be having a little difficulty on its feet, we don't want to push it, of course, because that will only create other problems. But this is starting to look pretty good here for this horse. I think this is it could be a little bit more, but it's starting to stretch into it a little more. We can see kind of how a flat-footed he kind of moves. He's still just kind of pulling himself more along with the front legs than he is doing anything behind. But you're headed in the right direction. Once again, if you have had some front foot soundness problems, then we wouldn't want to be racing this horse off its feet. So we must take all these things into consideration when we work any horse. What are his problems and how can we work around them at best? As I said, if you have a horse that's only sound in the walk, only walk it in the walk. And in time, you may find that the difficulties in the trot disappear. But once again, this is starting to look better. He's starting to stretch deeper into the contact here, and that's really good. So, and I like how his mouth looks calm and closed. He has a nice line of foam there along the edge of his lips. So that tells me he's taking the correct contact. So we really don't have any problem there. And this horse, I'm sure, will just continue to get lighter. As she said, when she got this horse, it was being ridden as a school horse in quite harsh bits because he'd become quite hard in the mouth, which is, of course, what happens to many, many horses that are ridden by people, who are too much beginners to be on their backs, and they just balance against the horse's mouth. And pretty soon, like anything else, if you grip the horse all the time with your legs, it will go dead to your legs. If you grip its mouth, it will go dead in the mouth. So that's basically it. So that's why it's so important that people understand that the correct contact with the horse is the weight of the rein. It's not any amount of pressure on the mouth of the horse. What the pressure that the horse takes is the pressure of the horse. It's like a sense of a positive contact of the horse pushing into the bit, but yet without pulling on the bit. That's what we're looking for, and that's what correct contact is. Once again, if we're constantly pulling on the mouth of the horse and have this constant backwards pressure, all that's basically happening is just that. The horse will go deader and deader in the mouth, and thus we see so many upper-level horses in double bridles being ridden almost entirely off of the curb with the curb rein straight back all the time because they're basically trying to force the horse into a frame. So that should be the first thing you look at, when we look at upper-level horses, is what's happening there. But this horse looks really good. He looks comfortable in his mouth, and his trot is looking better as he goes there. He doesn't, he looks like, there's a little hesitancy in his stride, but it's not bad. As you say, you had a little soundness problem with this horse, but it looks like it's working its way out. And if you keep working like this, I think you'll find it will solve the problem. Many times horses are actually what we call bridle lame, is that they're not really lame. It's just that they've been ridden so out of balance. As soon as you get on them and touch the reins, they kind of go lopsided on you, and they can look very lame, and it can have nothing to do with an actual lameness. But the horse is so uncomfortable in its gaits because it can't get over its back. So something to consider. As I tell people all the time, I can't make an unsound horse sound, but if I have one that appears to be unsound and I get it working over its back and all of a sudden it looks sound, well, what does that tell you? That's basically what we call a bridle lameness. So if we get the horse working correctly and it's sound, there really was no real problem. This horse was just out of whack. So once again, this is a much better trot that we're seeing here. He's starting to step a little more through and a little more actively, and certainly is accepting the work. She said when she started this work, the horse was freaking out and rearing and all this kind of thing, but you can see how quickly he has mellowed into this. And if you keep up with this work, you'll find that the horse will just change dramatically. Once again, it doesn't take feats of strength to train a horse. It takes an education, that is, knowing the steps that come in order to build that, just like building the foundation for a house. You know, you have to know what those steps are. You have to pour your footings, and then you have to use the right kind of concrete, the right kind of blocks, all of these kinds of things. So all of this makes a big difference. And once we learn to put everything in the right order, we find how easy it actually is to train horses. As I said, most people, if they can walk, trot, and canter reasonably well, are capable of training their horse, and they're physically fit enough to be able to do it. I mean, some people go out to lunge and they're simply not physically fit enough to even walk around the ring with the horse. So, you know, remember that we have to be fit as well. As I say to people all the time, you know, you'll never be a better rider than you are fit, you know. And it's one thing if you've been a rider all your life and you get a little out of shape, you can still perhaps function on some level, though not at the level that we once could. So it's very important that if we want to bring ourselves back into that kind of level of work, a higher level of work, we have to bring ourselves back to that level of conditioning as well, not only the horse. We don't use our strength against the horse. We use our strength to carry ourselves in the right position so that we can balance above the horse without balancing against the reins. You know, I have people all the time who come to me and I very often simply ask them to go home and go to the gym before they come back, you know, because it isn't safe. Being up on the back of a horse and being overweight or out of shape is very dangerous. And riding is a dangerous sport. And if we don't take that in consideration, we may find ourselves coming a cropper, as they used to say in the hunt field, which basically means you're on the ground. But once again, this is good work. Going in this direction, once again, the walk could be a little more active and swinging, but I'm really liking everything I'm seeing here, mainly that the horse is really relaxing and starting to stretch into the contact. So this looks like quite a willing participant. I mean, this boy, you know, having gone as long as he has without a top line and upside down, what you're going to find is he's really going to thank you. He's been, you know, all that agitatedness and sort of worriedness that you would have encountered when he was rearing and all these kind of things. That's all it, you know. When horses have never been trained correctly and consistently and in a system, they never know what's going to come next, so they're ready to resist whatever might be coming next. So that's why it's so important that we build on that foundation, doing the same things each and every day. And with a horse like this, like when we are ready to ride, that we don't just jump on his back, we do the groundwork first and then getting on their back for a while until the horse can, once again, until it can stretch into the contact in the walk and relax. That is my rule of thumb for riding a horse, is that, you know, I don't ride any horses until they're far enough along, they're strong enough in their back to be able to stretch at the walk and accept contact and move ahead of my leg without any major difficulties. Then a horse is ready to be ridden. Then we can move forward. I see so many people frustrating themselves, and even worse yet, getting seriously injured by getting ahead of themselves, riding horses that aren't prepared, who aren't in the correct contact with the bridle. How many accidents I've seen from people starting young horses, and 2 weeks later they're trying to take them on a trail ride. And of course, the first time something runs through the bushes or something, they realize that they actually have no control, and they end up getting seriously hurt. And I've seen much too much of that. One of the reasons I quit fox hunting personally is I got tired of waiting for the ambulances, because I'd be one of the few people who could actually ride my horse independent of the herd, of the packs, of the field, so to speak. So when everyone would move away, and because what normally happened out in the hunt field, all the people that were nose to tail riders, you know, if the field moves away, they have to go, or their horses will go completely out of their mind. So once again, I saw so many people injured in the hunt field because they came out, you know, on horses that weren't prepared, that weren't balanced. Especially a lot of people that came out in, you know, from these so-called, you know, riding clubs, and, you know, thinking that they were prepared to go cross country, and they've never jumped out of a ring, and nor has their horses ever gone in company like that and get themselves in a lot of trouble. So it's just something to think about. Once again, don't put the cart in front of the horse, as the old saying goes. Once again, this is really good walk. Nice and swinging, slowing down a little bit too much here, but not bad at all. You immediately correct them, and that's really good. You know, and having the patience to do this kind of work and just let this horse walk around like this, trying to keep that active walk, you know, you can do a lot of this walk work. That's the beauty of the walk. If the horse is sound enough to work in the walk, you can do a lot of it without damaging the horse, as opposed to trotting and cantering, which we can do very little of on a hollow-backed horse, which we don't do any of if we can avoid it. So once again, that's the whole idea, thinking of taking that one step further once we start training, you know, as you see me talk about many times with these horses. Some horses can canter over their backs better than they trot, but that's a very small number of horses. I'd say something like 5% of the horses I ever see. If they're hollow and then I see them cantering, suddenly they're better able to deal with it in the canter and get themselves in a better position than they are in the trot. So with those cases we can, but if not, we never want to canter a hollow horse for very long. And yes, we try it and see what happens, but if we can't get them over their backs, within a few circles, then we want to come back to the trot. Just like here, if you can't get him all the way stretched down in the trot, then you want to just come back to this walk work. And what you'll find is before long, you'll be able to do it in the trot as well. And as you've already experienced, the horse is calming down really nicely. All your problems have sort of started to disappear. So once again, that's the beauty of this system, and it is a system, learning how to take one step and then the next one that comes next. And once we build on that foundation, we find that it's very easy to train horses. Unfortunately, people are often impressed by riders who get on and make a big show of whipping horses up or even just riding them through rears and bucks and all this kind of thing. But that's really not a good idea. We really just don't want horses. We don't want to ever be fighting with horses. So if you do this correctly, there isn't any reason to ever have a fight with a horse. It's not to say that a horse might have a strong lesson, as Nuno used to say, once in a while. A horse that's gotten a little fractious about something. But when you see riders, once again, that make a show of themselves. I recently saw a big thing in Europe where some guy was jumping on these 3-year-old horses and they were rearing and bucking. And these people are applauding this like this is some big deal, The man is just obviously a very good rider. He could stay on, he knew how to stay relaxed and that sort of thing. But, one day he'll get on the wrong one and it will flip over on top of him. And certainly to send other people home thinking that this is a good idea, to do is certainly not serving anyone, because those people will go home and try it. People, monkey see, monkey do. So somebody sees somebody else going who doesn't really understand their level of skill and try the same thing, and they get seriously hurt. So if you stick to the classical program and put one foot in front of the others the way we should, you'll live a lot longer, and so will your horses will appreciate it. Once again, this trot's looking a little better here. It needs to be a little more active and swinging. But he's stretching quite nicely into it. I'd rather have this if he starts racing around hollow. That's no good either. But I like how you're interspersing just these short periods of work in the trot. I would like to see you encourage him just a little more active forward and see if you can get that swing like that. But a little bit at a time. I never want to just go in and try to slam the horse and get everything at once. You've got this horse calming down now, so he's beginning to trust you. So that's what we want to do, is build on that foundation of trust. But here he looks sound. Looks like he's moving better here in this direction. And he's starting to stretch very nicely and relax. All we need to do now is add to that. And you can see the deeper he goes down, the better the hocks move behind. We see how they're getting to be a little more lift in them and a little rounder circle like that. And we see how there starts to be more flexion, in other words, in the hocks. And that's what we're looking for. So still he could swing a little more active than this, but this is coming along really, really well. Better to err on the side of caution than not, as I always say. I've seen too many people injured by horses in all the years I've been doing it. I've seen some pretty horrific accidents, and I've seen some people crippled for life unnecessarily because, something went wrong or they weren't prepared in the right way to do the job that they're asking them to do. Just like as we see in 3-day eventing. I was a 3-day eventer for about 10 years and had a big eventing barn here in California that was very successful. And I did finally move away from it after the 1978 first World Cup that they had at Rolex there. That became the Rolex, but the World Championship was the first event they had there. And we just saw so many people injured. But now we're having something like an average of 3 people a year dying eventing. Well, that was unheard of when I was eventing. And many of the things have been dumbed down, and yet more people are getting hurt. Well, why is that? And that reason is because people are getting out there, they're counting on these warm bloods, the talent of them to jump the fences. But if you don't train them right, out there the fences don't fall down. So you get in wrong to one and the horse flips over on top of you and you're in big trouble. That's where you get hurt. So once again, having that foundation of training is so important to this. Now this trot's starting to look a lot better here. It's even swinging a little bit more. So this is really good. Looks a little more four square in this direction. That is, sound on all 4 feet. So that's really good. And once again, you could just act in your next video. In your next video, I'd like to see you just ask the horse to get a little more forward and swing a little more actively over its back. But this is all very good, and it's going to lead this horse. I really look forward to seeing this one develop. I love seeing these older horses that, get a second chance at life, and someone gets a hold of them who actually really cares about them and does the work in such a way that they can bring them back. A horse like this, once again, we'd like to be thinking of horses as, having 30-year careers, not 2 or 3 year careers. And nowadays, the really sad thing is with the veterinary medicine that we have these days, especially wormers, in old days we couldn't ever get all the worms out of horses, and once they invented those ivermectin and things like that that really cleared horses out, they're all living to be a really long old age, because that's what used to ultimately kill most horses, that you could never get all the worms out of them. As they got older, they eventually just would end up colicking from an impaction. But nowadays, we can really keep them cleaned out with the things that we have. So we're going to have horses that are going to live a long, long time. So we want them to be sound most of that time and not just turn into lawn ornaments, so to speak, that we have to feed every day. Or worse yet, end up getting put down at a very young age for the kind of people who just burn out horses and put them down right and left. But once again, this is a really nice swinging trot here. This is improved as we've gone. Not really showing any lift or anything yet, but that's okay. This will lead to that. That is, he's not really pushing up off the ground yet or developing any thrust, but the horse is starting to develop some swing. That is, it's swinging the legs through better and starting to use its hock, and you can see already the horse is really starting to loosen that whole bottom line underneath its neck, and that's all going very, very well. So I think you're right on track here with this horse. You've done a really good job of doing this on your own. I congratulate you for sticking to it when you said you had some difficulties there, the horse getting quite fractious on the lunge line. But you see how that just works itself out. Once again, every time we work a horse, it's not where we start, it's where we end up. Every horse that we ever work must leave the arena relaxed, and there have been horses in my life that I've had to keep in the arena for a long time just because they had learned to be so tense they just couldn't relax, and some of those I've had to keep in the arena a long time. But we have to make that breakthrough. The horse must never go away or go back to the barn and after being agitated in the ring without losing that agitation. So it's where we end up that's important, and you're ending up here in a really good place, and that's what's important. So no matter what you go through in the process, as long as you end up here with the horse relaxed and stretching into the contact, the next day it will just be easier, and the next day after that it will be easier and easier and easier. Pretty soon you won't even need those side reins. The horse will just stretch into it all by itself. So really great work. I look forward to seeing your next video. I think this horse is going to absolutely develop beautifully, and you've done a very, very good job up to now. So keep up the good work. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. And I'm sure it will be even improved over what I see here. Once again, the take-home is the horse is nice and relaxed, and that's what we're looking for. That's how we must end every session, just like that. Great work. We'll see you next time at Art to Ride. Thank you so much.